So, good afternoon again, everybody. And I want to personally thank everybody for coming out today and helping to support the Parafest and Hillsdale Cemetery. And I want to be sure and thank all of our presenters. Some of them, like our next presenters, came all the way from Connecticut. Tom D'Agostino came up all the way from Rhode Island. And people from all over the place. And none of them were making any money out of this. They were all donating their own time. So we really appreciate that. And this next bunch. I've known these wonderful people for a number of years now, and they're great investigators. They're great friends. It's the Connecticut Paranormal Research Team, headed by C.T.P.R.T, Dan Peer, and along with Kim Chalecki. Hey, I got it right this year. I screwed up her name last year. First I spelled it wrong on the website, and then I pronounced it wrong. So I'm just going to get out of the way before I do something else. So Christine, Dan, and Kim.
All right, thank you everybody for joining us. Again, I'm Christine. I am the director of the Connecticut Paranormal Research Team. We've been established as a team now for the last 18 years, and I've been investigating the paranormal now 32 years this year. So one of the topics we wanted to cover this year, to do something different, was, because we do a lot of residential cases, and we get a lot of families that contact us, and they have issues with their pets. So one of the topics we thought we would do this year is how families' pets are actually affected by the paranormal. And one good thing with that on our team is we actually have a certified licensed vet also on our team, so that played a huge factor when we do some of these cases. Look at that, Dan. Okay. Back up a little. I don't remember the slides, but anyway. So one of the things, obviously, is the pet senses over humans. We all know that, obviously, the dog's eyes, they can actually detect delicate movements in their eyes, where a lot of the times we think we see something out of the corner of their eye. By the time we realize what we saw, it's already gone. That's not the case with animals. They actually see it straight on. Their sense of smell is 1,000 to 10,000 times more sensitive, which allows a lot of dog sniffing dogs to detect missing bodies, corpses, and stuff like that. And they have hearing at a higher frequency, which is 4 times the distance of a human ear, which is pretty amazing for normal hearing. And this was a pet psychologist by the name of Marty Miller. And these were actually quoted by this psychologist who's been doing research over the senses of animals to detect whether or not they can detect paranormal stuff. She actually stated that sensing the supernatural is natural because they don't judge it, unlike humans. If you see a dog standing in the corner barking at nothing visible, then there's a pretty good chance that he or she is barking at an entity, spirit, or energy that doesn't belong there. And that is one of the common things that we hear from families that contact us is my dog's growling at the wall in the middle of the night. Go ahead, Dan. Now, another interesting topic when we were doing some research on this is natural disasters. Although scientists, they disagree that animals can detect natural disasters. They do believe, though, that their senses, being stronger than that of the human, allow them to know something is happening within the environment. Due to the fact of their senses, they can feel an earthquake coming before it's actually coming because of the sensitivity in their feet. Their hearing. Going back to Sri Lanka? Is that how you say it?
Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka. I knew I was going to mess that up. If anybody remembers the tsunami that hit in Sri Lanka, there were 20,000 human lives were taken that day. Not one animal died during that tsunami. People were watching as elephants, giraffes, all the wildlife literally were freeing and running away to reach higher ground hours before this tsunami even took place. But instead of the people following the animals, they stayed. So, yeah, exactly. Something that was pretty interesting, I just got this from Cindy, who is our vet that's on our team. She unfortunately couldn't be here this weekend because she does surgeries over the weekend. But according to Science News, scientists back in 2012 have actually been able to determine that birds have a protein called Cry4 that's actually within the brain, and it's in there, allows them to be able to find this protein in their retina. With that, the Cry4 protein increases during migration because they're trying to determine how do birds remember where they're going from the south and be able to fly back up here to the north. How do they know how to find their nest that they go back to year after year after year? With this, they actually, because of it being in the retina, they receive a lot more of the light with this particular protein, which allows birds to see EMF fields. This is the first documented scientific proof that birds can see EMF. So now it's to try to research what other animals can actually see these EMF fields. And I'm going to turn this part over to Kim because she was really excited about this. So here you go, Kim.
This was something that I found very interesting a few years back, especially with it being so close to home. We're in Eastern... This work? Can you hear me now? Okay. We live in Eastern Connecticut, so we basically border Rhode Island. And growing up in Rhode Island, any stories that come to my direction from Rhode Island always are a great interest to me. There's a nursing home in Rhode Island where they have this cat. This cat was able to predict a patient's death in this nursing home. Basically, this cat, very little social skills, be sitting on a chair in the middle of the hallway. People come by, try to pet it, the cat would hiss, very antisocial. But he would go into a room. His name was Oscar, by the way. He would go into a room, and within a few hours or later that evening, that person would pass away, okay? So it even came to the point where, like, if the door would be shut of this person's room, he would scratch and scratch, trying desperately to get into this room. Well, it turns out that our bodies, when we get ready to pass away, we release what's called, there's ketones. It's a bacteria that releases a certain smell when our bodies start to die. So within a couple hours of our deaths, this releases a sort of scent that Oscar the cat was able to detect. So, and it turns out that because he was able to sense this particular smell that no one else could smell, this particular smell, he was more accurate in predicting someone's upcoming passing than a doctor or a nurse could. So they've had this published, in the New England Journal of Medicine by Dr. Dosa, who's actually a doctor that worked at this nursing home. It's a Steer-Housing Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Providence. So, but I mean, it's just one of those things where animals, they sense. Like, you have like dogs who can sniff out cancer. You have dogs that can detect if someone's about ready to have a seizure. What they'll do, these service dogs will actually go up and press against their owner to kind of help protect them so not to fall, So these different things, they're doing more and more studies trying to figure out what it is that can actually detect, or how these animals can actually detect when certain things are coming on.
So I didn't even make actually this known when we started. I told Willie, when Willie asked, what are we going to do this topic on? So as soon as I told him, since then, I don't know where it leaked out, but we have been getting case after case after case been coming through that night, all with families, more so. I mean, we've had them from here time to time, but now since it was released, now we're getting all these people coming through with all these animals. So these are just two of the current cases that we are working on right now, and this is part of the email that the family sent us. My dog freaks out over things I can't see. He stands in front of me staring at something, does a very low, deep growl, and most recently he saw something and ran with his tail between his legs, hid underneath my kitchen table, refusing to come out even for food. And he has never displayed this behavior before. And on top of that, they have cupboards flying open and a bunch of stuff like that. Another case that we got that literally 10 minutes after this one, the family claimed that they're seeing shadow figures, voices, and their German Shepherd stands guard at their bedroom doorway, growling all night long. And they're not getting any sleep as a result of this. So these are two of the current cases that we actually are working on right now. So hopefully we can actually get some good video evidence of these animals acting this behavior, and then we can add that to these slides, which would be nice. Now, obviously, animals in the afterlife. Do you want to talk about this one? This was Kim's favorite little quote, so I'm going to let her talk about this slide.
Okay, so just like, a lot of reason why we got into the paranormal field is we want to investigate, people coming and passing, different spirits coming through. But animals, we believe, do that too. There's been so many cases where you see animals coming into the afterlife. You'll see or hear cases of like dogs, cats, horses, even a ferret coming through, and different sounds, maybe different shadows coming through. Just like people, why wouldn't they display the same kind of behavior when they come back? So you still have those feelings, you still have those energies. Why would they not stay just like a person's?
We actually displayed this photo last year during our presentation. But I don't know if the lighting is a little better this year, but this is actually the apparition of an Arabian horse coming out of a stall that one of our previous members had gotten. This was in Ledyard, Connecticut. This was actually a horse barn in Ledyard, Connecticut that completely burnt down, and all the horses died in the fire. It was an Arabian farm. And new owners took over, and as you can see, there's a cement aisleway in the middle of the barn, and there is no walls, because half the walls they were charred in the fire, and what's left is some of the stalls. So they had people coming in, construction workers, trying to restore the barn so that they can turn it back into a breeding farm. And construction people would be in the aisleway, they'd have their tools there, and then they would turn around because they were actually hearing the sounds of hooves coming up behind them. So they were gathering their stuff and hurrying up and jumping out of the way to realize there's no horses in this barn. There's not even horses on the property because they all died in the fire. And the new people that bought it obviously don't have any animals there at the time. So we came in, and this is during broad daylight when we were just snapping photos. You can actually see the barn doors are actually charred. But we actually caught the apparition of an Arabian horse walking out of the stall. And there's a couple good orbs that were in the stall as well. His head is right up top. You see the neck, and then its legs bent forward as it was walking out of the stall. And at the same time, you actually heard the hooves walking there, and there was no animals there. And I don't know if you want to tell your experience about your cat before we go to the next slide.
So I've actually had a couple different experiences, mainly dealing with cats. I'm a cat person. I lived in an apartment in Jewett City, Connecticut for a while. Turns out the place used to be an old boarding home. In fact, even on the doors, you could see where the numbers used to be on the doors. Well, there's this hallway at the end of the mirror, and when we moved in, you don't feel anything, you don't think anything. It was before, I read stuff about the paranormal, but it wasn't something I was quite into yet. But walking down the hallway, I just caught a movement down in the back of the hall behind me. And it just looked like a cat just kind of crossing the hall. You turn to look, all right, it just kind of, you pass it off. Maybe it's just something I just kind of, made up, you don't know. Later on, just sitting in the living room looking out, you see this cat, the shadow of a cat, walking along the hallway, rubbing up against the wall, and then continuing on down the hallway again. So, again, same thing, like with a person, why would they not continue that same thing? At that point, I knew it wasn't just something I was passing off. Last summer, we had our little family, my fur baby passed away, my Salem. She passed away at 19 years old. She always had a tendency, now she was the only, we had 2 cats, she was the only cat that would do this. She would pick a particular corner of the bed. You could hear her claws, because she wasn't a very good jumper, hear her claws clawing up the bed, and she would always rest right between me and my husband. She also had a tendency, if she was upset, she would mew. Otherwise, very, very quiet. Well, within 2 weeks of her passing away, just one night at the foot of the bed, I heard just the mew. Now, rational thinking, your cat just passed away, you're thinking about them, you're still grieving. It's just you're wishing to hear. Didn't think anything of it. Then within the next week, all of a sudden, I'm hearing that clawing at the corner of my bed, and you could actually feel the pressure of something on the bed. Now I'm thinking, we do have another cat named Midnight. I'm thinking that he jumped up onto the bed, just happened to be in the same spot. He was out in the kitchen with my husband. So, and I haven't had anything in the last almost 5 months now, but within those first 2 months, there was a lot of instances where, just in my room where she liked to hang out, just the sounds of the mewing, pressure on the bed in her spots, or the clawing that you would hear. Okay, we have a video that you can actually find on YouTube. This is from another team at a place called the Shanley Hotel in Napanock. They as well have, Sal, the previous owner, had a cat, and his cat had passed away. And he's actually in the video, and you'll hear him explain it a little bit.
And I had a cat for close to 13, 14 years. And when I had lived in the other house, I used to let the cat out at night, and the cat would come back during the day. But when I moved into the hotel, the cat refused to go out. And I couldn't get the cat to come into my apartment. For some reason, the cat wouldn't come into that room. And the minute I bring it into the room, she'd take right out the door. So I started feeding her outside in the hallway. And she would roam the building. Then after a while, she started going up to the 3rd floor. And she would come down to the 2nd floor, she would eat, and she'd go back up to the 3rd floor. Then after a couple of months, she refused to come down off the 3rd floor. And she would stay in Claire's room. And we picked up an EVP one night of Claire saying that it was her cat.
Yeah. And the cat actually, when you looked at that video, there's no head, there's no front legs, you just see the little back end. Now, the funny thing with that video, I've worked with Sal for many, many years, and I used to help out at this hotel for 5 years every single weekend, helping to restore the place. And we would always hear guests saying, hey, I was just up on the 3rd floor sitting in Joe's chair, and I was petting the cat. What's the cat's name? And I knew the cat had died, So I would question them. Was it not a raccoon? Was it definitely a cat? Did you physically see it, or did your hand go through it? And they're like, no, the cat jumped up on my lap. I was petting the cat and everything else. And then afterwards, I told them the story. I said, well, you just had your first experience because that cat has passed away 4 years ago. And constantly we would hear the cat crying in the middle of the night. We would have cat toys up there for the cat. In the middle of the night, you would hear the cat toys being played with, and people would always feel that cat brushing up against their legs. And it was amazing because the team that actually filmed this was a TV crew that were major skeptics at the time in the paranormal. So they left their equipment running all week long. And then when they were reviewing it, they contacted Sal and said, oh my God, we just caught the apparition of your cat on the film. And then this has been like, I don't even know how many thousands of views this video has actually made. But the cat, his name was actually Sweet Thing. So this is the famous Shanley ghost cat. Unfortunately, Sal did pass away, so he's no longer running the hotel anymore. But that is a memory that I'll never forget. And with that, if anybody had any questions or
even personal experience?
Yeah, if anybody had any personal experiences with pets that they may have lost on their own, or you have pets that are growling at nothing. Well, similar to humans, it's like their happy place. So they're gonna like with Sal's cat Sweet Thing. He loved the 3rd floor, and that room that you see him walking into was where one of the residents that used to live there, because the upstairs 3rd floor used to be a boarding house, and there was a resident that used to stay there, and her name was Claire, and she actually hung herself out that back window of her room. And like Sal had said, he had gotten an EVP from Claire saying the cat was her cat. And in that video, you see the cat literally going into her room. So I think just like with humans, that the pets that's wherever they're happy, their memory is just still there. And they're just still going to hang out.
Do you think that's residual or fatality?
That particular video was, I think, a residual type haunting. However, we've had intelligence where we've been able to interact with this cat, whether we're playing toys and stuff like that, and actually watching the cat toy come back at you. So we've actually been able to interact with the cat as well. Hi, Lynn. No, that was actually my ex-husband.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doing so, to me, what I'm seeing is this horse jumping out of the stall, almost like in order.
Yeah, because you can actually see the front legs are bent like he was leaping out of the stall.
So I don't think,
And those horses were locked in the stalls. They couldn't escape that fire.
so it would almost hit me as being, I don't know, an intelligent hunt. I mean, he's going through that, maybe it's residual, but he's not just walking around,
Right, right.
he's escaping.
Right. It's like a literally like the memory of him when he was trying to escape from the fire. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. And hopefully you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.